Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. This is the second webinar organized by the WSIS+20 Working Group at APrIGF, which is on the reflections on the WSIS+20 Zero Draft. As most of you are aware that the 20-year review of the World Summit of Information Society is taking place, and the Zero Draft has been released late last month for comments till 26 September. While the Zero Draft reaffirms the commitment to a people-centered, inclusive, development-oriented information society that is grounded in human rights, aligns with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It also talks about persistent digital divides between countries, genders, vulnerable groups, and talks about making it more inclusive, promoting multilingualism and digital literacy. It also talks about capacity building, having equitable access to technologies, especially for least developed countries or small island states, African countries, etc. It also talks about the risks of emerging technologies, calls for safeguarding human rights, inequalities, mitigating environmental impacts, and it talks about the enablers such as sustainable development, trade, education, disaster resilience, more cooperation, financing mechanisms. And on the governance part, it advances the principles of multi-stakeholder internet governance, calls for a permanent mandate of the IGF, recognizes the role of national and regional IGFs such as this, and it also calls for aligning with the WSIS implementation with the Global Digital Compact, and talks about a lot of things. It's quite a huge document. And the reason why the working group on WSIS+20 at APrIGF is kind of having this webinar is because more than half of the world lives in APAC. We are diverse in terms of economy, cultures, geographic terrains, even tech adoption and development. Therefore, when these global discussions happen, which is going to shape the discussions for at least 10, 20 years, our voices matter and our perspectives should be included. And that is why we want all of you to discuss the various issues which the Zero Draft raises and also share your perspectives. For example, is the Zero Draft addressing the challenges of our region or your region? What are the key concerns and realities from the APAC region? And how can we also contribute in shaping this discussion and dialogue from the APAC region? So this webinar is going to be organized in a very workshop style format. We will have breakout groups to discuss 5 key issues. While there are many issues which the Zero Draft discusses, but the working group actually identified 5 key issues on which we want to discuss, and this discussion would be for 30 minutes. And each of these groups will come back and report within 5 minutes of what they have discussed, and then we could perhaps summarize on the next steps. And the key issues identified are the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance, and we would have leads for these. So Jordan Carter, who is there in the call, would be leading that part of facilitating that part of the discussion. We have the second issue, which is digital access, inclusion, and connectivity, which Said Kazi and Jasmine Koo would be kind of coordinating. We have Human Rights by Pavitra Ramanujam, Building Confidence and Security in ICTs by Cheryl Langdonor, and Digital Economy by Albin Kwan and Ashirvad Tripathi. Albin may be a bit late in joining, but he would be joining, and Ashirvad would take it over to begin with. And the facilitators would be discussing 3 guiding questions in the breakout groups. While they would be speaking more on it, but I'm just sharing it as an overview. What is missing and where are the gaps in the Zero Draft as you see it? Why do we want to keep and reiterate? What do we want to keep and reiterate or expand upon? and what do we like to see that is currently captured in the zero draft? So these are the three questions. There are no rights or wrong. It is just perspectives which we would want you to share. And I think with that, unless Rani, I'm missing something, we could have the breakout groups. I think there was a preference which many of you shared in case we have some groups where we have less people. We may, Rani may help to manage that. And of course, apart from these issues, if you think there is something else which you really want to highlight, please do feel free to share it with the facilitators. And with that, I hand it over to Rani.
Thank you, Amrita. Without further ado, I will then move you all to the breakout rooms. So see you guys later in the next half an hour.
Okay, Rani, are we all back?
Yep, everyone is here.
Okay, so we would have the first group now sharing what you all discussed. And I think that is Jordan's group, Multi-Stakeholder Model of Internet Governance. Jordan, who would that be?
Yin Chin is going to give us the report back.
Yin Chin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Amrita. So we just for a caveat, we discussed it based on the broad questions of what do we want to keep and reiterate slash expand upon, and then what do we like to see that's currently captured in the zero draft, as well as what is missing and where are the gaps in the zero draft. And the focus, of course, is on the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance for our group. We didn't quite manage to go through each of the paragraphs or like the full text in details, but we did just like broad discussion. So overall, I would say in terms of what do we want to keep and reiterate slash expand upon, is that we think that the listing and reaffirming of the multi-stakeholder model was good. There could be a bit of expanding on how the funding could be like to maintain the permanent mandate of the IGF, as well as maybe to look into a bit more on other, I guess, stakeholders that are currently not participating super actively. For example, maybe the private sector to engage more at the IGF, and so maybe that could kind of address the funding part as well. But again, this could be a bit more on the details, and it may not be added into the zero draft as text per se, but that was what we thought that, in terms of expanding upon or reiterating might be good. Also, one part that we discussed was the encouraging funding for NRIs, as well as the role of local UN offices to help encourage information and participation in IGF and the WSIS process. And one last thing would be more details on the operational details and modalities. In terms of what is missing and where are the gaps in the zero draft, I would say based on our broad discussion, there were no major gaps that we flagged from topic. But of course, I mentioned earlier in terms of the funding proposals of IGF, that's probably not clear enough at this point. And then what do we like to see that is currently captured, which means we want to confirm it, would probably be to keep the IGF as a permanent forum, as well as to keep the reaffirmation of the Tunis agenda. So those are the 2 points of the parts that we want to kind of confirm and reaffirm. The group did touch upon a little bit broader than just internet governance topic as well, which I'll try and capture because it's a bit of kind of broad, but we did talk about needing a sustainable internet in terms of infrastructure, so a bit more on underseas cable and relations to geopolitics, as well as meaningful internet connectivity. So it seems like digital divide remains in rural areas, and we probably need to address this. And then also seems a bit vague on the protections for vulnerable populations, including women and indigenous communities, as well as it seems like probably in the zero draft there's a lack of mention of tools for implementation, and also decision-making processes were probably not mentioned in details in the zero draft. So this is some of the broader things that we discussed. And then there's one point on paragraph 109 specifically on enhanced cooperation. We had a question mark on this one. So it's 108 mentions enhanced cooperation and 109 recalls the work of the working group, but it doesn't quite elaborate what enhanced cooperation means. And maybe it's a question to all of us to kind of think like whether more specifics or details is needed, or should we just keep it broad at there and just keep the term there? So it's more of a question mark. It's not a recommendation or suggestion to actually ask for more details. And then just to add one last part, which is a flow over from the AP Star meeting that we had last week. So for those in this group who doesn't know the AP Star community, it's made up of the AP Star slash iStar organizations, gearing more towards technical community. We typically have meetings tagged to APNIC and APrIGF. So we did have a interactive discussion on the WSIS+20 specific parts as well. But just broadly sharing with this group as well, we recapped some of the discussions from the AP Star meeting last week. And in general, I would say we were pretty, I guess, happy in a way in terms of the definition of internet governance in the zero draft, as well as the listing of the various stakeholder groups. And also it was good to see that, they covered internet governance encompassing both technical and public policy aspects. So that was a recap from the AP Star meeting that was kind of discussed in our breakout group as well. And then just one last pointer on how our group felt about overall the zero draft. I think all of us feels is generally positive. Some details may be added, but I think everyone generally felt positive about it. And I'm going to pause here to see if I missed anything important and my group can add. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to Amrita.
Thank you so much, Inchin, and thank you to the group 1 on issue 1 on having all the points written down. That would be really helpful for us and to for the working group so that we can also put those things down. And thank you so much for this. And we move to the next group, which is going to be digital access, inclusion, and connectivity. And I think Said Kazi is going to speak. Kazi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Amrita. Hello, everyone. So we discussed since the theme was digital access, inclusion, and connectivity. So there were a couple of points that has been highlighted in the zero draft. And I think if I'm correct, we all agree in the group that these points are all 11 points, first of all. Second is somewhat generic points in terms of an intro point kind of a thing that talks about there's a growth in connectivity, there's a growth in access, there's a growth in man and woman using internet devices have increased. So these are quite agreeable points that certainly with increasing the way we are moving forward, there will be more of an access and inclusion expansion will happen, no doubt. So that is second point. Third point, of course, we discussed a few points which were relevant. And by the way, I think this whole topic of access inclusion, we are quite familiar. I think a lot of has been discussed all over the world, globally, in APrIGF and all. But what are those interesting or very specific points that perhaps this document, especially in this segment of this zero draft of access and inclusion, have agreed upon or have highlighted and also could have been added is, first of all, is in terms of digital divide. So it talks about digital divide in terms of within the country, among between the countries, between the region, within the region kind of a thing. So specific to the Asia Pacific region, that we all need to see how this divide is also takes care of those migrants, those people, elderly people who are having affected by the conflicts that is happening because there are conflicts around. Then also perhaps looking at this point from the point of these natural calamities also is very important, this divide whole perspective. So these were some of the points we discussed. Secondly, next is in terms of gender digital divide, because that was a point highlighted in the zero draft. So we discussed about perhaps the LGBT community when not specifically mentioned this minority segment of the population, but certainly the document somewhere is mentioned that minorities, but that specifically this aspect of minority or the gender neutrality kind of a thing hasn't been highlighted because of whatever reasons. Then, of course, perhaps we felt that this whole gender digital divide should also highlight in terms of the background context, this whole socioeconomic, cultural context that still limits or hinders access for thousands and lakhs of women, millions of women across this Asia Pacific region, especially in those low-income countries. And as I mentioned earlier, that perhaps we also try to just discuss the climate change aspect into the whole digital divide and inclusion and connectivity part. The other point we discussed was the affordability, because that was also a point of highlighting the zero draft. And that in that particular point, I think that's a very interesting point by one of our I think I forgot her name. Our session participant and resource person was that in many societies, communities, there is also struggle for basic needs. This affordability is a big challenge, because what is the priority then? Whether they should have a priority over the basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter, or they should also talk about the buying devices. Apart from buying devices, they have to buy the internet also, which is also not a very cheap kind of a thing. Even the plans are changing, and the whole whole service arrangements are also changing every now and then by the telecom ISPs and things like that. So there is another point we discussed. Then another point that has been highlighted in the zero draft was on financing part, that how these public and private stakeholders, the companies, needs to come together to invest more on infrastructure, more on the services, more on the quality of services kind of a thing. But then one point I think that Amrita has very rightly mentioned was that perhaps money may not be a problem in many cases. Perhaps the question is of course, where the money is going, whether it's going in the desired destinations or not. For example, I think just in the reference, not to put something on black and white or not to just criticize anything. For example, in many countries, there are USOF fund, Universal Services Obligation Fund, that we have. For example, in India, we have a fund that is specifically, lots of money is being allocated on that. But how and where the money is being invested, even that money is also being subsidized for the private investors to go and invest in the hilly region, landlocked areas, and things like that. So where the money is gone, where is the reporting mechanism? What is the mechanism we are tracking on that? Who is raising questions on that? And perhaps the zero draft could have come out more specifically on whether the existing resources are going and utilizing them effectively. Perhaps that is an important point of consideration. And finally, I think going back to the 2 points on the last 2 points is one is, of course, going back to the inclusion part, digital access and inclusion part is the people with disabilities and the people with elderly ages, because the graying population is increasing in many societies and all. Perhaps what that mean in terms of digital inclusion and access, because more of a textual base, the format of the content, format of the services delivery are important points of consideration. For example, we may need more of an audio version of content going forward in terms of facilitating the access and inclusion for this segment of population, and what are the technologies and innovations perhaps we need to invest more. So those are the kind of broad discussions we had. And I think if I have missed out anything, perhaps our team members in the group, Amrita and other members, could just flag, and I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kazi, for this. And I guess we will have to put it into a document. The others in the group can also add in case they couldn't speak for it. And we'll go to the next group, and that would be human rights. Pavitra, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amrita. Yeah, as Amrita mentioned, our breakout group was on human rights, and we had a broader discussion on the section and on the zero draft as a whole. I think that there was agreement that it is extremely important and good that human rights has this specific section, that there is recognition of the fact that human rights are central to the internet and to the idea of a free, fair, open internet, inclusive internet. There was mention of the fact that the human rights section is actually quite substantive in terms of the number of paragraphs that have been allocated to it. It has over 16 paragraphs in total. But at the same time, a number of those paragraphs, maybe over 8 to 10 of them, read as a preamble of sorts, where they reiterate past language, where they reiterate past commitments. For instance, they talk about, and these are all very critical, of course. For instance, they talk about the fact that there is commitment to key instruments, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ICCPR, the ICESCR, CEDAW, the Convention on the Rights of a Child, rights of persons with disabilities, and so on. It reaffirms, for instance, commitment to the fact that human rights offline and should be treated the same way. Human rights online should be treated the same way human rights offline are, and so on. But at the same time, the fact that it is in many ways a reiteration of previous language, and that talking about the actual issues with relation to human rights only form a minor part of the section, covering only a few paragraphs. There was also a differing view on this, which is that there is a need to perhaps reiterate some of these commitments, particularly in the context that we live in, where there is a backslide of human rights in some countries, especially in the region, and also the fact that this is in many ways already agreed upon, negotiated language, and so putting it down on paper and reaffirming our commitment to that is good. There was some comments on the fact that there are some parts that don't necessarily dive deep, where the problems are mentioned. For instance, problems related to restrictions on freedom of expression or right to privacy, digital harms. Some things that are absent entirely, for instance, are an explicit mention of the right to work. Now, this is covered, for instance, in digital economy, but it is not necessarily recognized as a human right. And the implications of having a right to work explicitly mentioned. Similarly, no explicit mention of a right to internet access as a basic human right, which is something that could be critical as well in terms of dealing with some of the issues that Syed mentioned on access and inclusion. There was some comment as well, particularly on the sections on women, that it really needs to be, it is simply not enough what has been mentioned in terms of rights related to women. It should be mainstreamed across the document. It is not mentioned consistently across the zero draft, and there needs to be a reaffirmation of the kinds of perhaps struggles and challenges that women face when it comes to the internet, and particularly in terms of the digital harms. There is mention, for instance, of gender-based violence. There's mention of hate speech, but it doesn't fully diagnose the problem. It doesn't fully recognize why this situation has occurred and what can be done about it. And there was also mention in particular about the fact that the language at the moment in this section, but perhaps in the zero draft overall, it doesn't go far enough in terms of being able to express commitment. There are language, for instance, that talk about reaffirmation or acknowledgement, but not necessarily that of commitment or action. For instance, one of the sections that we discussed was the role of the OHCHR, which is mentioned, but it is mere acknowledgement. It doesn't mention what the OHCHR could be doing in the future within WSIS, within the commitments of WSIS, to be able to enable and protect human rights online. And finally, that there is also no mention beyond gender and beyond women, and children on the protection of other vulnerable groups and the sort of differentiated impacts that they face due to the current challenges on the internet. So I will stop there. I don't know if others would like to add anything more. But if not, thank you for the opportunity, Amrita. I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Pavitra, for sharing. And we will go to the next group, which is building confidence and security in ICT. And that would be Giri.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to share our discussions. It's really quick, and maybe we need more reiteration later on the open doc. I would like to conclude probably in the beginning. We all have the same positive vibe regarding the confidence and security in ICTs, and hopefully this will become our guideline in implementing in our own countries, in our respective countries, regarding the what they call the prospects and maybe the regulations. I will try to elaborate what are the 3 points that have been addressed in the discussions. The first one is what is missing and where are the gaps in the zero drafts. I would like to suggest maybe the missing one in paragraph 62 in the zero draft regarding should there be a prosperity be mentioned in the end of the paragraphs, that because human rights maybe had been very well discussed in the previous sections, but should be technology should be make people also become prosperous or maybe happy also. And then others, the participants in our breakout rooms also suggest that cyber attack must remain a focus to ensure optimal safety for internet users and to improve trust in digital technology and ICTs. All partners must be involved in such policy. So this is the probably missing in the paragraph 63. And in this paragraph 64, should this be addressed and counter? Because as I suggest, the order of maybe thinking that maybe counter and address, we recognize as it right. We recognize that we must urgently counter and address. Should we what they call reverse the logic? We address first and then we counter all forms of violence. And then Manoj also suggests that zero draft commitment to address violence and harmful content online is commendable, but it has significant gaps in approach. So it identifies a broad range of harms from hate speech to cyberbullying, but it lacks a clear and universally agreed upon definition for many of these terms, which is critical for effective policy, as suggested by Manoj. And further, he elaborates also, most importantly, while it promises to establish robust risk mitigation and redress measures, it does not provide any specific example or a framework for what these measures should look like. So this leaves a crucial gap in how this noble intention will be translated into concrete actions. Additionally, the draft's commitment to protecting privacy and freedom of expression while addressing this harm is a key challenge. And the document is missing a detailed explanation how these often competing values will be balanced. And the last paragraph, it's maybe it is well defined and then also particularly detailed one. So there is nothing that we want to address. And the second question is, what do we want to keep and reiterate? We do not have any any comments about this. And the last question is on the right columns. What do we like to see that is currently captured in the zero draft? On the paragraph 62, our colleague said that the zero draft successfully captures several key elements that are commendable and should be celebrated. It correctly identifies the link between digital security and human rights as a user perspective that frames the issue ethically and holistically. The document also rightly views digital security not merely as a defensive measure, but as enabler for broader goals like innovation and sustainable development. Furthermore, it implicitly acknowledges that this is a complex issue requiring a multi-stakeholder approach, recognizing the roles of government and the private sector, civil society, and others. These elements collectively lay a strong and principled foundation for a future digital cooperation. So maybe there isn't any more we'd like to see questions regarding other paragraph or paragraph 63, 64, and 65. And as we have been discussing, these paragraphs have shared a common ground for us for the present issues, and then maybe offer the future projections as building confidence and security in ICT will probably very contextual in our respective countries, but it maybe has more like an umbrella terms for us. But hopefully this will open any further discussions as we open the Google Doc, as Cheryl suggests. And maybe is there any more suggestions or comment from our participant in the breakout room? Maybe Cheryl, who want to add?
Yeah, all good.
Thank you. Thank you for us.
Thank you so much for sharing this. And we will go to the last group, but it is an important group too. That's digital economy. Alban and Ashirvad, who's going to present?
Well, I will do first,
Okay.
and Ashwat, if you have any comments, please add in. I would be quite concise in our summary. So so basically, I think the group discussion is that the language used in the digital economy section tends to be slightly softer than other section as well. Mainly, we use recognize and not as the terminology used in this session. We did kind of wonder whether this is done deliberately, as digital economy would be kind of interrelated to a lot of other issues that we discuss as well. Is there a reason why only recognize and not are being used, and should there be a stronger language to emphasize the importance of the financial and economical reasoning in driving a lot of the other issues as well? So maybe it's something that is more action oriented, and a bit more stronger commitment from UN would be desirable. So that's an overall kind of summary. Specifically, I only want to point out two things. So in line 35 and 36, we talk about it is quite important to talk about how this kind of concentration of technological capacity, market power, are being discussed and controlled. However, we also talk about when we develop financial services, especially the newer form of payment, we agree that this is very important for developing countries. However, when we develop these kind of new technologies, we also have to remember the interoperability of the services. Otherwise, we're going to fragment the internet, or even but when we also think about interoperability, we also have to balance out whether if we make everything to be interoperable, would it also cause even stronger concentration of market power by the bigger players as well. So that there needs to be a balance between these two paragraphs. Now, we don't have time to really go through everything, but so far this is what we discussed. The only thing that I want to kind of add as my personal observation is on the platforms, and which is the second paragraph in the segment, and how it would be quite important. I think it would be interesting to see whether we can include this kind of discussion, because as we see them being a critical part of the digital economy. Are they part of the discussion at the moment? If not, how can we include them in the WSIS or IGF discussion? So that's would be my summary. Ashwa, any comment from you? Like, Wanda?
You've covered it very well. Thank you so much, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Albin, for this. And that really is helpful. And thank you to all the leads and the volunteers who actually stepped up to share what the groups have spoken. I think for us from the working group on WSIS, this has been really helpful. What we would be doing next is whatever has been shared by the breakout groups, we will try to assimilate and see where we will try to assimilate those points and put it, and because we are contemplating a submission from APrIGF, if we have those relevant points, etc. So perhaps from now to at least 24, we plan to work on it and see if we can make submission. We'll also we'll share the document with all, so that in case you all have any comments, you could share. We do have our chair of this working group, Joyce, in the call. I'm not sure if she can speak because, this is, what we plan to do. Also a request that there would be stakeholder consultation on 14th and 15th. I think that 15th would be more of an APAC time. It would be good if community members from here register and speak in the different sections. That would be great. We would also want to take a group photograph, so don't run away, everyone. But Joyce is going to speak to us, our chair. So Joyce, over to you on the next steps.
Hi, everyone, and many thanks to Amrita and to the WSIS+20 Working Group for putting this together. I think a huge effort has been made. And also, Amrita, thank you so much for leading this webinar. I think we do still have some time, and so I might suggest for the remaining part of this webinar, we could just do an open mic sharing, because some people who were in their respective groups would not have had the chance to share their views on other portions of the zero draft. And so if this webinar allows, might I make that suggestion for people to share your views on any other parts of, perhaps you have an interest in another group, another section of the zero draft. Please feel free to, raise your hand, take the mic, and share your views as well.
Thank you, Joyce. I think that's an excellent idea. We didn't cover many parts. If anyone wants to speak, for example, we have the AI section, for example, the flavor of the all times, or even if, say, for example, you were in digital economy, but you want to speak on access, inclusion, etc. Please feel free to share your points. Just raise your hand and we have an open mic. Anything else we miss, as in we've not covered many of the things, but if you think you would want to speak. And it's, yes, Joyce.
I will get the ball rolling first, while others are thinking about their interventions. Of course, coming from APrIGF, my interest is largely on the section regarding internet governance. I think that a lot of the language that has been put in the zero draft in the internet governance section is largely positive. I think the UN COFAX did make an effort to listen to all our feedback and try their best to include a lot of the feedback that was sent to them throughout the previous consultation round. So I'm really very happy, and I think that for those sections that we support to see need to continue from the zero draft, it's very important when making our contributions, whether it's a statement to the UN COFAX, whether it's during their consultation sessions. I think it's very important to state those areas that you feel that you support strongly as well, so that they are retained during the negotiations throughout the coming months. So it's not just about, what's missing, where are the gaps, what can be done better, but also to talk about the things that we felt were done well. And should remain as part of the negotiation. So that's my point. I'm happy, to give the floor to others. Please raise your hand and also share your views on the zero draft.
Absolutely, Joyce. I think it is also important to applaud or even talk about the things that are good so that it is retained, because we also need to remember that this is going to be the first negotiation text, so we will see a lot of edits coming. And yes, Jennifer is here from the IMSP. Jen, do you want to share your thoughts?
Thanks, Samrita, and you are also on the sounding board, but of course in this role you're hosting the webinar. Apologies, everyone, I'm not turning on my camera. It is now beyond 2 a.m. for me. But I was actually not really sharing thoughts on this so much as really asking some questions, because now I have my hat as IMSB on, and there are certain, I guess, tricky issues or controversial topics that I'm wondering if APAC community, especially APrIGF community, has thought about or wants to opine on. One of them, of course, is enhanced cooperation, and I know that it has been included in the internet governance section. It has been mentioned in a very matter-of-fact way. There's been some expectation that this will, take up some airtime during negotiations. The second one I wanted to kind of bring to our attention, I guess even if we don't have thoughts on it right now, we should probably formulate some, is especially to do with the funding piece or the financial mechanism piece. And I think that is something that we should also, as internet governance community, really give some good thought to, because in Zero Draft, it mentions, it kind of defers to the Secretary General to come up with some proposals. But of course, Internet Governance Forum itself has been funded through a largely voluntary basis through many different stakeholders, not just member states. So I don't know what that might mean if we're just asking for proposals to come back. So that's another item I think is interesting for us to think about. And then finally, for APAC, there is, of course, still a huge digital divide. And I'm wondering if collectively we think that language is strong enough to articulate the realities we're facing, getting us to solutions that we need to get us online. So these are the three things I'd like us to kind of think about some more. If not now, then definitely by the time we have the consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And since I was in the digital access breakout group, I'm just speaking as one of the members there. What we discussed is that the first paragraph, which talks about the development which happens, does not actually reflect the entire of Asia, because Asia is very diverse. However, we do understand that's a more global statement. But again, if you look at the next 2 or 3 subsequent points, it does talk about the digital divide, the persistent digital divide. It talks about the divides between LDCs, small islands, etc. It talks about gender divide. So in that group, we thought that it is adequately covered. It's just that, perhaps the social issues are not brought into context. When we are talking about affordable connectivity, the challenges of, the handset costs, etc. It talks about affordable devices, but what about electricity? Is it available everywhere? Those are also fundamental things for connectivity. So those were issues which were discussed. And if others from the group wants to speak, or there are people who are work on digital inclusion, access, etc., you could speak. So I think the first para, what we thought as a group was, it's more aspirational, but then it talks about the realities also. But anyways, if other groups also, other people in the call wants to share, please feel free to do so. Yes, Kazi, please go ahead.
I think Joyce and also Jasmine has highlighted some of the critical considerations that as a group we may have going forward. Just to reiterate, 2-3 things is one, of course, how the climate change factor is being considered in the zero draft entirely also. Wherever applicable, it's not that forceful linking up or that I think I haven't, maybe we have to again wait or I have to wait again. That could be one of the considerations that, of course, in Asia Pacific, we have more climate vulnerabilities and all, number one. Second is, of course, in terms of the conflict zones that we have. Of course, we know there are many societies, countries that we have in constant conflicts, and there are also undercurrents going on. There are potential factors of conflicts now and then. And of course, because when I say conflict, perhaps it's of course ethnic conflict could be one of them. But again, the recent, very recent case that in our neighboring country because of which we couldn't have the APrIGF. So those kind of also are the kind of conflicting situation without specifying anything like this. But then those are the conditions that could also hamper the entire efforts that are going on for years, investment efforts, inclusion, and also one is climate change, then of course are natural disasters that I have mentioned already, and of course these conflicts, how these are factored into various aspects or the themes in the zero draft could be considered and discussed, or I don't know, just a thought I'm sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazi. Albin, over to you.
Thank you. I want to have a quick response to Jennifer's question. So on the first question, which is related to enhanced cooperation, I think my impression is that at the moment, the WSIS paragraph basically put the responsibility back to the working group on enhanced cooperation. Now, that I don't exactly know what the process is, but the worry I have is that the multi-stakeholder community would not be able to participate meaningfully in the discussion on enhanced cooperation. Now, I'm not sure if this is asking for too much in the WSIS document. If at that paragraph, multi-stakeholderism is kind of encouraged in the discussion, that would make it clearer that throughout the discussion on enhanced cooperation, everybody could participate as well. Now, that's the first point. The second point, I think, is on the funding issue. My own personal opinion is that when we look into the internet governance definition in WSIS, it talks about the three main stakeholder group, the civil society, private sector, and government. Certainly, technical community was left out, for some reason. But if you only look into these three sector, private sector are the one who typically could provide financial, mechanism and funding. At the moment, I believe a lot of the discussion, even if you read the WSIS document, how private sector could get involved are often lost. When we look into financial and funding, I think it would be related to how we actually get the private sector back into the table and participate in the discussion. If they find meaningful participation, I think we are able to get the funding issue resolved. Now, I think in the internet governance section, this particular discussion, especially on IGF, has been kind of put back into IGF to discuss. I don't know whether we can do much more on the WSIS document itself, but at least we have some IGF mag here. Maybe when we start talking about how do we actually enhance IGF later on, this could be something that we raise. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albin. Kazi, is that an old hand? I guess so. Anyone else has any points? And Rani, just a quick check on how much time do we have? If you can just put it into the chat, that would help. Cheryl, you have a point. Do you want to speak it out?
Oh, I'm happy to do so. Cheryl Langdon for the record. Yeah, just I noticed in chat we were mentioning when multi-stakeholder and multi-stakeholder enhanced cooperation or cooperation is mentioned. Just wanted to note that it is also mentioned quite specifically, and I've done a quote, cooperation at all levels, in paragraph 65. And paragraph 65 in the Building Trust and Security in ICT is very much a motherhood statement, but it's a very important one that goes through talking about the building of confidence and security in the use of all communication and information technologies. There's a reiteration of previous things, but and resolutions, but it does specifically note promoting that multi-stakeholder mechanism. So I think there's a strong argument for having that term more generously sprinkled throughout the document where we think relevant. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Jasmine, you will be the last one, and
Yeah, sorry.
be brief.
Yeah, just a very quick one. Since I think previously when we mentioned about funding and resources, so I forget which paragraph is it, but we see that there's something that mentioning fellowship dedicated to for AI development and capacity building on AI. So it's a bit concerning for me and also with my other youth members in the group, because it seems that the resources has the intention of dedicating to AI capacity building, but not internet governance itself, like not a broader sense or other topic, but just for dedicated to AI. So it's just a small things that I want to highlight when we consider how resources could be allocated better and how can we balance among different types of internet governance and digital topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Just to clarify, this was approved by the Secretary General for the AI part of it, which has been referred here. So it's not, this is the linkage between the GDC part as well as the WSIS part. So that's just an additional support mechanism to encourage. So we should not mix that with other initiatives. And I think with that, we take a group photograph, if that is fine with all of you. If you can switch on your cameras, please do. And I'm not sure, Rani, would you be taking the picture for us?
Yep, will do. So once everyone ready,
Okay,
once your camera is up.
It always takes more time than you think for everyone to switch their cameras on.
All right.
Whoever can, if you can switch on your camera, and let's take our photograph.
Okay, I'm gonna take the first page. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, and next page. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Great. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. This has been really helpful. We'll circulate, we'll have a document, so please do put in more comments if you want. And yes, thank you for all your contribution and participation. I think it has been quite helpful for us, both as APrIGF and I think for Jen and me in terms of IMSB, to at least get some feelers about tricky issues and the other issues which the APAC community is thinking. In case you're making submissions, please do submit by 26th, and please register to speak online. Deadline to register is 26 September. So please do it before that on the topic you wish to speak on. So thank you, everyone, and bye for now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye, everyone. Thank you.